This isn't the science lab. Hello, I'm Phil. Welcome to my channel where I talk about all the geeky pop culture things that I love to watch and consume and talk about. Things like Doctor Who, things like the MCU and other superheroes, things like Star Trek. And it's Star Trek that we're talking about today, because of course a brand new Star Trek Discovery episode has dropped called Scavengers. In terms of my general thoughts of this episode, it was certainly a very much more one of the more action-packed episodes. It had a lot more in common with the first episode of the season than the episodes that have preceded it, which a lot of them were a bit more slower paced and thoughtful. This was a bit more action heavy again and a bit more exciting action type mission, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, despite the fact that so far the first episode of the season is probably my least favourite of the season. There is a place for that within Star Trek, and I think there is a place for high octane, high energy, like this is a bit of an escape mission, more focused on the action than more of the cerebral stuff. There's a place for it. You just can't do it too often, I think. I think you have to have enough of the other stuff in there as well. And I think there's probably been enough of a gap between episode 1 and this that it's okay. Saying that, though, there wasn't really any big theme or sort of message to this episode, other than, I suppose, a very basic one of, hey, slavery's bad, let's escape it. I mean, but there wasn't really anything massively deeply explored. And like I said, that's not always necessarily a bad thing. Sometimes you just wanna relax and just watch some action, and the occasional episode of that is fine. But I did find myself missing the kind of the sort of morality play aspect a little bit in this episode. But there was still lots of good stuff. I mean, I like seeing Book again. It was great to see him again. We got, again, a nice broad selection of seeing different members of the crew. Even though the A-plot was very much focused on Burnham, there was a good wide selection of the rest of the crew focused on in different scenes. Even if it was just, like we only got to see Culber at the very end in a quick scene with Stamets. And we only got to see Stamets right at the end, really properly as well. So, even though they're short, I like the fact that they are still emphasising that ensemble nature by having, dipping in and out to different members of the crew throughout the episode. Lots of different members of the crew got their moments, got their scene in this episode. But it was predominantly Michael's episode in terms of the A-plot, and there was some good and I think important character development for her in this episode, and also some good character development and important moments for Saru as well. So that's my sort of overall thoughts. What are the specific things that I really liked about this episode? Let's talk about the ship upgrades, because they're getting some cool upgrades in this episode. They're getting 32nd century technology grafted onto their ship. They've got programmable matter, where the stuff comes up. They've got comm badges that are also tricorders and holographic displays. Amazing. The detached warp nacelles as well. I still don't know how that works, but hey, future technology. Looks good. So we're going to have a bit of a different look to the ship going forward. I don't think they really showed that off massively. We got to see the pylons being dissolved and so the nacelles detached, but we didn't get a proper I'm really looking forward to seeing it in flight now. A nice, luxurious, not too long, but enough to clock what it actually looks like in its new format without the pylons and stuff. That would be really good to see. I hope we get to see that next episode. So the new technology was good. They've also got some new technology, personal transporter technology, which leads into a very amusing recurring gag throughout the episode of Linus just randomly transporting into rooms while other people are having conversations, because he's accidentally transported to somewhere he didn't mean to go to, because he's getting used to their technology still. I thought that was really good. A nice little funny moment that kept on popping up, and it paid off really well towards the end, where Michael and Book are in a turbo lift about to kiss, and then suddenly Linus transports in. That paid off that little joke really well, I thought. Nice little moment, and it's always nice to see Linus, isn't it? In terms of Burnham's character development, we've had I said that I was expecting this to happen a few episodes ago, where she's basically got this kind of like two sides, struggling between the two sides of her. She's got Giorgio on one side, kind of encouraging her to go down the more of the rebel, disobey commands routes. You've got Saru, who is very much, we need to play this by the book. You know, there's a chain of command. So you've got this kind of angel and devil on her shoulder thing, is how I've referred to it in the past. And you get to see that playing out more than any other episode so far in this episode, because you know, she goes to Saru with once they receive this communication from Book, indicating that A, he might be in trouble, and B, that he's got something that might indicate and might help them solve what happened in the burn. And she goes to Saru, and he says, "We can't go. Sorry, we've got our orders. We have to stay here." And then she goes to Giorgio, because she's planning on, she's come to this idea that she will probably defy the orders herself. It's not like Giorgio suggests it. In fact, she even puts the counter argument to her that this will undermine Saru. Do you really want to do that? And then as soon as Burnham says, kind of basically, I feel I have to, then Giorgio's like, excellent, let's go. And so you've got this angel and devil on her shoulder thing, which I really like, and I'd like to see played out a bit more as well. But I don't think it's treated too casually. You know, there are consequences to her actions in this episode. And even though it works out in the end, in terms of like lives are saved, you know, there are consequences at the end of it, and she disobeys orders. And it led to a really nice scene where Saru is really conflicted as well, what he should do. And he approaches Tilly about this, and he's kind of expecting Tilly to try and talk him out of telling the Admiral that Michael has disobeyed orders and gone off by herself. But actually Tilly goes, no, you need to tell him, because, you know, it's going to undermine not just you, but literally the trust the Admiral we're trying to get from the Admiral for the whole crew. And Michael is undermining that. So I like the fact that even her best friend is at this moment going, no, you need to tell him. And it's a really interesting moment for Saru as well, because he wants to trust Michael, but she's showing him that he can't really trust her at this moment. And after all they've been through together, that is a shame, but I think it will lead to some more interesting stories as well in the rest of the series. So Michael and Giorgio go off to this sort of I think they called it, well, I don't know if it was the Bajoran, in the Bajoran area. I know there was a reference to the Bajoran settlement. I don't know if that's it, or if I missed something that the book just got waylaid. But basically it's an area that's run by this sort of criminal syndicate of the Orions and the Andorians. And, you know, it's basically slavery. There's slavery going on, indebted servitude, and they kill the people running it will kill their workers if they try and escape. And they very effectively demonstrate that. The most interesting part about this storyline, it was all good. It was a fun action adventure storyline. I thought rescue the love interest, as it turns out to be, and also get the information out. It was a sort of action mission, but there was some hints at some more interesting stuff. There was the Andorian guy I thought was quite interesting, who had previously tried to lead a bit of a rebellion against their captors, and as a consequence of that had his antenna chopped off, and also been made to give the chips in the back of people's necks to people. So everyone ended up the chips that would blow up their heads if they went past the pylons, the perimeter pylons. So people ended up resenting him for that. And even though he's trying to help people out where he can, there's this sort of resentment against him, and he goes through a bit of a redemption story. He ends up saving Book's life by almost sacrificing himself. It turns out he's okay in the end, but that possibly would have been a bit more powerful if he'd actually died, although maybe that just would have been a bit stereotypical. I don't know. But I found that quite interesting. That was an interesting little side plot in there, an interesting character to develop. I don't know if he'll return again. He's obviously on the Discovery at the moment, we may see him again. Now, one thing that I wasn't sure about in this episode, and it will vary, it's not a bad thing at the moment. It will depend on how it plays out later on, I think. It could end up being good setup. It could end up being a bit contrived. I don't know yet. But Jojo is getting these weird flashbacks. We know there was something wrong with her from the previous episode where she, after being interrogated by the guy with glasses, possibly a Section 31 agent, she started getting sort of zoning out. Now we see what's happening when she's zoning out. She's getting these flashbacks to things that she appears not to remember. And while I think that could potentially, there could be some interesting story in that, it does feel a little bit repetitive of Tyler/Vox storyline, where he started getting flashbacks of, being what he thought was being tortured, but actually it was his transformation from a Klingon to a looking human. This feels very similar to that in the sense that it's flashbacks they don't know about, and it's some kind of traumatic event. There's a mystery there. They don't know what's going on. So it feels like it's treading on old ground a little bit. But it may, depending on where it goes with it, it may save it. So at the moment, I'm not necessarily putting it in a bad column in terms of about the episode. More of a kind of, I'm not sure, and we'll have to wait and see where it goes. There's certainly some good, I can envision some possibilities here where there's some good. And if Jojo is going to go on to be a lead character in a spin-off, the Section 31 show that we keep hearing about, they do need to do some more work in maybe making her a bit more sympathetic. They've done some of that work so far, and making her a character we can root for. But I think they may be setting up something where they're going to do a bit more of that work here. As I said, it was good to see Book again. Him and Michael have such brilliant chemistry, and I think they are always great on screen together, so good to see him again. It was great to see Adira talking to Gray. We saw Gray, she saw Gray, she was having conversations with Gray. There were a couple of nice scenes there. This is kind of what I was hoping would happen, that Gray would show up. I want him to show up in a bit more capacity, a significant capacity a bit later on. This was very much a couple of character moments of her needing to make friends, and then at the end, Stamets coming in and sitting down, and they bond over the fact that they've both lost someone they love, but who has come back to them in a way. Different way. They've come back in different ways. Kolber literally came back to life. He is there. He can be touched. Gray is someone that she can just talk to and see, but she can't interact with any more than that. So there's differences, but it was a nice touching moment. It was a moment of sort of acceptance as well, because there was a line where she talks about, he says, "Look, I don't think you're mad." And there's this opening up there, so there's this sort of trust formed between the two of them. In fact, okay, I did say there wasn't a theme in the episode, but actually, I'm literally just realising this, that I suppose slightly trust is a theme. The trust broken between Michael and Saru, and then the trust gained between Stamets and Adira. They form one forms a trust, one breaks a trust. So there is a little bit of a theme there, but I don't think they played massively into it. As I just mentioned it again, let's go back to Michael and Saru's relationship here, and their friendship, and the breaking of the trust. Because at the end, I think it's very important here that Michael does suffer consequences for her actions here. She does lose something, she doesn't regret what she did, because she got the information, and the Admiral even acknowledges this. I might have even sanctioned this mission if you'd come to me with it, because this might be important information. And she saved the man who she does get together with. I didn't mention it. I briefly mentioned it when I was talking about the Linus thing, but yeah, they hook up in the end. It's all good. They kiss in the turbo lift even after Linus has gone again. So they are now a couple. Good for them. They've got good chemistry. So I doubt she regrets it, but she probably regrets the fact that to do it, she had to break this trust, and we see consequences. We see not only her getting a dressing down, but literally Saru making the decision to demote her, because it's left in his hands. The Admiral doesn't demote her. It's left to Saru to decide what he has to do, and he reluctantly takes the decision that he has to demote her from second in command to just science officer. So that is obviously, I mean, she's only been second in command for 3 episodes, so it didn't last very long. And I think this is a learning point for Michael, and she still could go one of two ways. I think she'll either end up towards the end of the series veering back towards the Starfleet way, or she might split off from the crew completely. One of those two things, if we're talking predictions, that's where I think it might go. One of those two ways. I'm not sure which yet. I think that's going to be the struggle throughout the season. But I think Saru made the right decision. He did have to do it. And it was good to see the fact that there were consequences to these actions. It allows for some development for the character, but without it being ridiculous and, as some people like to say, Mary Sue-like, where she just gets to do what she wants. She doesn't. She gets consequences. There were consequences to her actions, bad consequences to her actions. So I like that. That was good. So yeah, overall, I mean, it wasn't a bad episode. There wasn't the plot itself. There wasn't much in the way of. There wasn't a morality tale aspect to it. There was a bit of a theme about breaking of trust and gaining of trust, but overall, I think it maybe lacked a bit on the sort of intellectual substance, but it was still a fun episode. There was a lot going on. It kept my attention throughout, so I wouldn't class it as a bad episode at all. It was very enjoyable to watch. What do you think? Do you agree with me on that? Did I miss something? Did I miss a very obvious theme or morality or something that I just didn't pick up on? I don't know. Maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. Let me know all that in the comments below, and let me know what you thought of the different different character beats in this and everything you thought of this episode. Let me know in the comments down below. I will be back, of course, for another Star Trek review next week. Do please hit that like button, subscribe, hit the bell, all that kind of jazz, and I will see you again next week. Thanks for watching.